So what are we doing today? Today we are covering 25 plus important object-oriented programming interview questions with answers using C# language. Now, even though this video is made using C# language, it is very much valid for people who are in Java, who are in C++. Why? Because object-oriented programming concepts, do not change as such. Now, before I start answering the questions, I want to make a very, very important statement. When you talk about IT programming interviews, if you are not able to answer object-oriented programming interview questions, right, it is very difficult you will clear the interview. Because in every project, object-oriented programming concepts are used. So no senior, no team lead would like to see a developer who does not understand abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, overloading, dynamic polymorphism, static polymorphism, abstract classes, interfaces, right? So if you are not able to answer simple object-oriented programming questions, it is very difficult you will make through the interview, right? So let us get started. So in this 1 hour of video, I'm going to go and cover object-oriented programming interview questions around classes, objects, abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, overriding, overloading, static polymorphism, dynamic polymorphism, abstract classes, interfaces, and so many other things, right? So let us get started. And before we start with the first question out here, I want to make a small announcement. I want to give you a small gift out here. So here is a small gift, which is a 200-page C# interview question ebook, right? So if you go and if you share this video anywhere on your LinkedIn or on your Facebook or on your Twitter, right, you will get this free C# interview question ebook, a 200-page ebook. You can see here, I'm scrolling this book. There are lots and lots of questions out here, which every C# and .NET developer would like to revise before going to the interview, right? So I would suggest, guys, go ahead, share this video anywhere on your LinkedIn, on your Facebook, on your Twitter, and get this free ebook. And please visit my website, questpoint.com. We have a lot of videos out there which are specifically meant how to crack interviews, how to get your next jobs, how to prepare for technical things, right? So a lot of videos out there, C# interview questions, ASP.NET interview questions, SQL Server interview questions, Azure interview questions, Angular interview questions. So interview questions with demonstrations, with proper explanation, which will help you to get the next job, right? So with that, let us go ahead and get started over here with 25 plus important object-oriented programming interview question. And let us start with the first question. Why do we need object-oriented programming? What is the need of object-oriented programming? What is the benefit of using object-oriented programming? Now, when this question comes up, right, many developers answer like object-oriented programming will make your code better. It makes your code readable. Some developers talk about features of object-oriented programming like abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, and so on. Please do not hit around the bush. Answer to the point. The first P in a technical interview. Answer to the point. The person who is taking your interview is a senior person. He does not get extra paid for it. At least to my best knowledge, when you take an interview as a senior, you don't get paid. He is already stressed with project deadlines, and on the top, in the interview, if he's seeing hitting around the bush, it just irritates him, right? So let us try to answer this question to the point. Why do we need object-oriented programming? Object-oriented programming helps us to think in terms of real-world objects. Let me iterate this sentence. Object-oriented programming helps us to think in terms of real-world objects. Let us try to understand this statement, thinking in terms of real-world objects, right? So let us say you are creating a software for an hospital. So what does a hospital have? A hospital has patients. Fine. So what you will do now, you will go to your code and you will create a class patient. Patient has a name. Fine. Patient has a name. Patient has an address. Fine. Patient has an address. Now hospitals have doctors. Fine. So you will say class doctor. Doctor has a name. The patient is allocated to a doctor. A doctor treats a patient. So what you will do now, you will go and you will say, okay, here it is. This is the doctor object aggregated inside it. So you can see now your code is mimicking the real world object. Patient has a name, address, there is a doctor who is allocated to a patient, right? So by having such approach, right, you can manage your code better, your code gets organized properly, right? So object-oriented programming helps us to think in terms of real world objects. So as we complete the first question's answer, I want to go and stress one more important P about technical interviews, and that is be practical. Whenever you give an answer in an interview, right, always try to substantiate it with some practical examples if you can. For example, you just saw that I said, okay, object-oriented programming helps us to think in terms of real world objects. And then later on I said, I gave an example of an hospital, I gave an example of a patient, of a doctor attending the patient, I talked about aggregation. So just try to support your theoretical answers, with some practical examples as well, right? This sends a message to the interviewer that yes, you have worked on enterprise applications and you are the person for this job. Now, one serious request, when it comes to object-oriented programming, don't give examples about cars and dogs and cats and trees and fish and TV and so on, because it can send a wrong message to the interviewer. It can make the interview very weird. So always try to give examples like inventory, payroll, billing, accounting, like hospital management system or something, your domain, whatever domain you have worked with, right? Try to give examples around that domain. So now let's start with question number 2. What are the important pillars in object-oriented programming? Now there are 4 important pillars in object-oriented programming. The first one is abstraction. Abstraction means show only what is necessary. Second one, polymorphism. Object can act differently under different conditions. So a user object can become an employee, a user object can become an admin, or a user object can become a worker, right? So object can take different shapes in different conditions, or it can act differently under different condition. Third one, inheritance. You can have a parent-child relationship where you have some things common in the parent and the child can inherit and add something more to it. And last one, encapsulation, means hide complexity. So hide anything which is complex, which should not be shown outside the object. You should try to hide it, right? So abstraction, polymorphism, inheritance, and encapsulation. Now definitely, in the coming up lectures, I'm going to go and talk very detail about abstraction, inheritance, and so on. But this question is very focused. The question is, what are the important pillars? So I just answer these 4 points. Now, very important point. In case, you don't remember these 4 things, remember the word pie, right? A for abstraction, P for polymorphism, I for inheritance, E for encapsulation. Do not shy. Do not be shy, like saying that, oh, like I'm preparing for interviews, right? Remember the third P, always be prepared. Everything is fair in job and war. It's okay to use acronyms. Guys, you are working in a company, you are doing some practical works out there, you are sending emails. The whole day you are not revising, right? The whole day you are not learning. You are actually doing a job. So doing a job and cracking an interview are 2 different things, right? So be prepared. A prepared developer has more chance of clearing the interview than an unprepared superhero. So you can be a superhero in a company, you would have delivered big projects, but if you don't answer simple questions like what are the important characteristics of object-oriented programming, it is very difficult you can clear the interview, right? So must be for this question, you can remember this acronym API, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation. So before I move to the rest of the questions out here, very quickly, let us reiterate those 3 Ps. If you remember these 3 Ps while you're giving the answers, believe me, half of your problem is solved, right? So first P, be prepared, right? Second P, be to the point. Don't waste the interviewer's time. And the last P, be practical. Talk about some practical examples, right? Remember, cracking a technical interview is 70% technical. 70%, yes, you should have a knowledge of that topic. But 30%, you like it or not like it, it is about presentation. It is about your technical vocabulary, right? So let us move on to the next question. What exactly is a class and what exactly is an object? A class is a blueprint. A class is a type. So you can see this is a class employee. It has name, it has address. Probably it can also have some functions, methods, right? So this class is a blueprint. Now, if I want to go and use this class, then I need to go and create an instance. So for I will say employee E1 is equal to new employee. So now here E1 is an object, it is an instance, right? Or I can create one more instance, E2 is equal to new employee. So this is a second instance. So you can say that, okay, E1 name is Shiv, right? Employee, and the E2 name is something, right? So we can say a class is a type, a blueprint, while if you want to use the class, you need to go and create an instance of the class, which is an object. Differentiate between abstraction and encapsulation. So now the answer to this is abstraction means show only what is necessary, and encapsulation means hide complexity. I repeat the answer. Abstraction means show only what is necessary, and encapsulation means hide complexity. If you look at the answer, it is so synonymically same. It is like saying that we are happy when we drink beer. Drinking beer makes us happy, right? So definitely again, the interviewer will counter question you saying that what's the difference between abstraction and encapsulation? So here it is. Abstraction says that show only what is necessary. So for example, now let us say this is an employee class. So in the employee class, the name has to be shown outside. So we made it public. Address has to be shown outside. We have made it public. And then this is the validate function, which has to be shown outside, and we have made it public. But now what happens is, for example, when you say validate, right? So you would like to go and validate the name. You would like to go and validate the address, right? So what happens is you create the two more functions, or I will say rather, developer will create two more functions like saying check name, which will actually check the name, check address, which will actually check the address, right? So inside the validate function, you will have now check name, and you will have check address, right? But now you want to only show validate outside and not check name and check address. Check name and check address are more internal things. Developer has created it, right? Actually, so when he actually started coding, developer has created both these functions so that the validate function can be completed, right? But now what happens because of making everything public? You said in abstraction that, or we decided that for the employee class, only validate should be seen outside, but we are also seeing check name and check address. So what do? We go ahead and we make this as private. We make this as private. Now if you see, I only see what is necessary. I see the name, I see the address, I see the validate, but I don't see check name and check address, right? So abstraction is nothing but it is a design thought process, or it happens during the design phase. So when you get the requirement in your technical document, right, you say that in your class diagram, you say that what are the public properties. You decide, what are the public methods, public properties, and public classes which has to be exposed outside. While during implementation or during the coding phase, the developer needs more functions, to complete the abstraction or the design, right? The thought process. So at that time, he creates more of these functions, and he needs to use the access modifiers like private, public, and protected to implement encapsulation. So what we can say is that abstraction happens during the design phase. So just trying to put a more appropriate answer. Abstraction happens during design phase, right? So in the design phase, you say that you decide what has to be shown public, right? And during execution phase, developer uses Encapsulation, when I say he uses encapsulation, means he uses the private and public and protected access modifiers to implement the thought process of abstraction. So, one more thing which you can really put ahead before the interviewer is encapsulation. Encapsulation implements abstraction, right? So, just again summarizing the answer. Abstraction means show only what is necessary. Encapsulation means hide complexity. Abstraction happens during the design phase. So initially when you say that you want to design the employee class, you decide what has to be public. But while the developer goes to the execution phase, he needs to create more functions, and those functions have to be hidden, right? Or else the object will look very complex. So encapsulation happens during the execution phase, and encapsulation implements abstraction. So abstraction and encapsulation actually complement each other, right? So just try to when you give the answer, just try to emphasize that abstraction and encapsulation complements each other, and encapsulation implements abstraction, and abstraction happens during design phase, and encapsulation happens during or it's executed during the coding phase, right? Explain inheritance. Inheritance is one of the properties of object-oriented programming, wherein you can define a parent and a child relationship between two classes. So for example, you can see this is an employee class out here. You can go and you can create a new class called as, let us say, manager. So this manager will have all the properties and the methods of the parent class. So to do inheritance, you will use : manager inherits from employee. So now what happens is you get all the properties of the parent class, the methods and everything, but you can go and you can define your own methods in the child class. So I can go and I can say here, manager does management, right? So you can see now, if I create the employee class, I will get X methods, X properties, right? But if I create the manager class, right, the object of the manager class, I will get all the properties and the methods of the parent class, but as well as the manager class has its own extra methods like management. So inheritance is nothing but it defines a parent and a child relationship between two classes. Now remember that in the interview, a lot of times this question can also be tweaked, and the interviewer can ask you, what is a relationship? So is a relationship is again a parent-child relationship. Is a relationship means manager is a child of employee. So a lot of times this inheritance question is also tweaked by asking that what is a relationship? What is the use of a virtual keyword? Or what exactly is virtual methods? Now this question can also come in a tweaked fashion, wherein the interviewer can ask you, explain the concept of overriding. So overriding, virtual keyword, virtual methods, the answer lies in the same concept, right? So a virtual keyword helps us to define some logic in the parent class, which can then be overridden by the child class. Means, for example, you can see that we have this class employee. So we can go and we can say that this method as virtual, right? Now, as soon as you give this word virtual out here, you can go to your child class. For example, you can see this manager is inheriting from the employee. So the manager becomes the child class. We can go here and we can say override validate, right? So the employee class will have certain functionality, but we can go and we can override here with our own logic. So virtual keyword helps us to provide some implementation in the parent class, which can later be overridden in the child class. This concept is also termed as overriding. One of the connected questions which comes with overriding is, what exactly is method overloading? Also, this question can come in a tweaked fashion. What is the difference between overriding and overloading? Method overloading means you will have the same method names with different signature. So you can see that we have a validate method out here, and I will have one more method here called as validate, but you can see that it has an input. So this is validate without any inputs. This is validate with the input. I can have one more validate where I say some another input, right? So you can see now the validate method in this class, in the manager class, has been overloaded 3 times. One is it has validate without any signature. Another one it has validate which has a boolean input, and there's another validate which it has 2 more inputs. So method overloading means in the same class you can have same method names but different signatures. So you can see here validate without an input, validate with a boolean input, and validate with 2 more inputs. This is termed as method overloading. Also, let us quickly summarize the difference between overloading and overriding. I'm not sure why this question comes up, because it is comparing apples with mangoes, right? But let us try to at least put some sentence around it. So when you talk about method overloading, then in the same class you have the same method names with different signatures. Method overloading means in the same class you have the same method names with different signatures. But when you talk about method overriding, it comes in a parent-child relationship. So there should be a parent-child relationship, or else method overriding does not exist. So for example, here we have an employee class. It has a validate method which is marked as virtual, and then this virtual method is later overridden by using the override keyword. So in method overriding, we are actually using this override keyword, and there is a parent-child relationship wherein the parent class has a virtual method. So you can see here, this is a parent class, it has a virtual method, and later the child class uses the override to override it. So method overriding makes more sense when you talk about parent-child relationship. When you talk about a parent method being overridden, when you talk about method overloading, in the same class you have the method names with different signature. So first thing, congratulations, we have completed approximately 20 minutes and we have completed 9 questions. Now the coming 4 questions, that means from question number 10 till question number 14, is completely on polymorphism. No object-oriented programming interview is complete without a question on polymorphism. So we're going to go and talk about what is polymorphism, what is static polymorphism, what is dynamic polymorphism, what is operator overloading, and so on, right? So before we move ahead with the questions on polymorphism, if you're really liking this video, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Please hit that bell button out there, so that whenever we upload an interview question video, you get an indication. Explain polymorphism. If you see the word polymorphism, poly means many and morph means change as per situation. So polymorphism is nothing but it is an ability of an object to act differently under different conditions. For example, you can see the code on the screen here. You can see this employee E in this line number 9 is acting like a manager, and the same employee object E in line number 10 is acting like a supervisor. So in line number 9 it is becoming a manager, and then dynamically in line number 10 it is becoming a supervisor. So this is termed as polymorphism, the ability of an object to act differently under different conditions. Can we implement polymorphism without inheritance or without parent-child relationship? The answer is absolutely no. This question is specifically thrown to you from the interviewer from the point that do you understand polymorphism in detail? For example, in our case here, if you see this employee E is becoming a manager in line number 9, and in line number 10 it is becoming a supervisor, because both the manager class is inheriting from the employee as well as the supervisor class is inheriting from the employee. For example, if you remove this inheritance out here, you will see that C# will start throwing exceptions. So to implement polymorphism, inheritance is a must. What are the 2 kinds of polymorphism in C#? The 2 kinds of polymorphism in C# are static polymorphism and dynamic polymorphism. Many developers also term them as runtime polymorphism and compile time polymorphism. right? So runtime polymorphism means dynamic polymorphism, and compile time means static polymorphism. Static polymorphism is implemented by method overloading. Static polymorphism is implemented by method overloading, while dynamic polymorphism is implemented by overriding. So static polymorphism is implemented by method overloading. You can see out here, we have this manager class which has a validate method, and this validate method, one is we have a validate method without the signature, and then we have a validate method with a signature, with one signature, and then we have a validate method with two signatures, right? So this is static polymorphism. This will be checked during the compile time. Means when I hit the build, at that time it will be checked. But when you talk about runtime polymorphism or dynamic polymorphism, that happens in a parent-child relationship. So in a parent-child relationship, for example, we have to use the virtual keyword. So this is the virtual keyword validate, and then the manager goes and inherits and overwrites this validate. So what I can do now is I can say dynamic polymorphism, employee can point towards manager and he will call here validate, right? And the same employee can point towards supervisor and he can call validate. Now this is runtime polymorphism, right? So method overriding is runtime polymorphism and method overloading is static polymorphism. Explain operator overloading. Operator overloading is a concept of polymorphism where you can redefine operators like the plus sign and the minus sign and the multiplication sign with additional functionalities. For example, you can see inbuilt inside .NET by default, if you see, right, when you use the plus sign with strings, for example, you can see in this line number 9, I'm saying that Shiv plus Koirala. So now this will do unconcatenation. This will concatenate both the strings. But if I go and if I say here 1 plus 2, if I say this, then this will actually do an arithmetic addition. So by default itself, you will see polymorphism in .NET. But now definitely the next cross question from the interviewer can be, what if you want to go and implement your own logic of polymorphism or do a custom operator overloading? For example, you can see here, I'm creating an object of some class called as O1, and then I'm creating another object called as O2. What if I want to go and say O1 plus O2? I want to go and add both of these objects, right? So for that, what you do is that you have to go ahead and use this operator overloading keyword here, operator. So you can see here I'm saying operator and the plus sign, and this complete method, this method you have to define it as static. So you can see public static sum class operator, and you pass the first instance of some class, you pass the second instance of some class, and then you define your logic what you want to do. So here what I'm doing is I'm adding these two numbers out here of some value, right? So if you want to go and do a custom operator overloading, then you need to go and use the operator keyword. So if I run this application out here, so if you see here, in this application, two objects will be added. So O1 plus O2 will give you O3, and in O3 you have 10 plus 20, which is 30. So the value in the O3 object of some value is 30, right? So operator overloading means the ability that you can overload an operator with additional functionalities. And if you want to do custom operator overloading, then you need to use the operator keyword. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to me as well. We have completed 30 minutes of this video. We have completed 14 questions till now. Now from question number 15 till question number 27, these questions are on abstract classes and interfaces. No object-oriented programming interview is complete without a question on abstract class and interface. It's one of the most confusing topic. It is one of the most important topic, and it's one of the most loving topics, when it comes to object-oriented programming interview questions, right? Before I go there, before we start with abstract classes and interfaces, a small request. If you can go to facebook.com/questpond, and if you can say that, yes, I am on question number 14, I am on question number 15, right? It just tells us that, how many people are watching our video till what limit, right? and this encourages us to record more videos on this channel. So please go ahead on facebook.com/questpond and say that yes, you have liked this video, or you are on question number 14, you are on question number 15, you are on question number 25. That will help us to measure, that whatever we are doing, is it really useful or not. So let us continue. Now, between abstract classes and interfaces, abstract class is an easy one, right? So let us start with some questions around abstract classes first, and then we will go towards interfaces, and then we will compare the difference between abstract class and interface. So what exactly is an abstract class? An abstract class is a half-defined parent class, or you can say an abstract class is a partially defined parent class. Now let us try to understand this with an example. So you can see here I have a customer class, and then from this customer class we have two other classes which are inheriting. One is a gold customer and another one is a silver customer. Now both the gold customer and the silver customer share lot of common properties. For example, they share the customer name, the address, the product name, the amount, right? But you can see there is a calculate discount out here, and this calculate discount is overridden by both of the classes with their own behavior. Means, for example, if you see the calculate discount of the gold customer, it is giving a 10% of discount. If you look at the calculate discount of the silver customer, it is giving a 5% of the discount, right? And in the parent class, because we don't have any implementation, we have said here, throw new not implemented exception. In other words, we are saying that if anybody tries to go and invoke this calculate discount of the parent class, it will say that this will be done by the child classes. So there is no implementation out here. Now the problem with this approach is, right? The problem with this approach is that somebody can go and create an object of a customer class like this. You can see here, somebody can go and create the object of this customer class, and he will try to invoke the calculate discount. So what will happen here is we can have confusion, because you have a customer class. So the developers will try to create an instance of the customer class. They will try to invoke this calculate discount, and they will get this not implemented exception, which is really bad, isn't it? Now, why is this happening? Actually, over here, there is no implementation, right? In other words, in this customer class, there is some implementation, and for some of them, there is no implementation, and those implementation has to be defined by the child classes. In other words, we need to create a class which is half defined, partially defined, right? So for that, we need an abstract class. So we create an abstract class by saying abstract. Now this method, calculate discount, is without any logic, right? So it should be half, right? So in other words, there shouldn't be any logic out here. So we go and we say this as an abstract. So you can see here now, this customer class now is half defined. In other words, the name, address, product name, and amount is fully defined, but the calculate discount will be overridden by the child classes, and the logic will be defined. And the best part about the abstract class is that because it is half defined, you can't create an instance of it. So the confusion, where you can go and you can invoke an half class, and then later on you get an error. Now he is actually stopping you to not create an instance, which is actually very good, right? So just trying to put ahead what you have to speak to the interviewer. An abstract class is a half-defined parent class where there are some implementation which is defined and some implementation is left to the child classes to be defined. One more tricky question which comes around abstract classes: are abstract methods of an abstract class virtual? The answer is yes. If you remember, in the last object-oriented programming interview question, I had talked about the virtual keyword. So virtual keyword, what it does is, basically if you define in a parent class a method as virtual like this, in the child class you can override it, right? So in the child class you can go and you can say override. You can see this calculate discount is seen because this is virtual. If I remove this word virtual, I will not see the calculate discount, right? So the question here, what the interviewer is asking is that if I declare a method as abstract in an abstract class, is it virtual? Yes, it is virtual, because down below you can go and you can say override and you see calculate discount. If you don't declare this as an abstract, it will not be seen. So abstract methods in an abstract class are by default virtual. Now there can be some short questions around abstract classes which can be asked, and those answers are just yes and no, but be very careful when you're answering them. So the first short question which comes around abstract classes is that, can we create an instance of an abstract class? Absolutely no. You can't create an instance of an abstract class. The compiler will throw up an exception. So you can see here, when I say new customer, it says you cannot create an instance of an abstract class, right? So that is the first short question. The second short question which is asked around abstract class is that, is it compulsory to implement the abstract methods in the child classes? So means, for example, you can see here we have calculate discount. So is it compulsory that we should implement those methods in the child classes? Yes, it is compulsory. So remember that these methods are half defined, right? So if you don't implement them, for example, if I don't write a code in the child class, you will see that it gives me an exception saying that the gold customer does not implement calculate discount. So if there is an abstract method or an abstract function, right, that it has to be implemented compulsorily in the child classes. One more cross question, which can be asked around the abstract class is that, why can't a simple base class or a simple parent class replace an abstract class, right? Now remember that a simple base class or simple parent class, we cannot define it in a halfway. We cannot define it partially. In other words, for example, here, if I make it a simple class out here, then I need to go and write some kind of an hack logic. For example, I will say here return null, or I will say return 0, right? Or must be I will say throw new not implemented exception. So it's not a clean way of creating an half partial class, an half base class. It's like a hack, right? But when we actually go and create an abstract class, this becomes a pure partial class. Some things are defined and some things are not defined. So the difference between a simple class and an abstract class is that abstract class is a pure half defined class, while a simple class is a class. And if you want to make it half defined, then you need to go and write those hack logic. Then you need to go and write those logic, which can be very uncomfortable, in terms of programming. Now let's talk about interfaces. Interface is where all the confusion happens. The main root cause of the confusion is that interface has lot of benefits, and every interviewer wants to hear his benefit in the interview. Like some interviewers would love to hear that interface is a contract, and then some would love to see that you speak about multiple inheritance and so on. So that's why when we try to answer questions about interfaces, right, it's quite challenging. So let us try to see that how we can tackle this. Now, to my best knowledge, the most widely accepted definition or the most common definition across the industry for an interface which I have seen is that interface is a contract. Interface is a contract. It's a legal binding between the developer who is creating the class and the consumer who is using the class. Now let us try to understand this statement, interface is a contract, because once you say to the interviewer that interface is a contract, you are bound to get a lot of cross questions like saying that, okay, can you explain what do you mean by interface is a contract? Can you give an example, right? So let us try to see an example so that you can answer the counter questions in a proper way. So you can see here that there is an interface here called as iCustomer, which has name, which has address, which has product name, which has product amount, and calculate discount. So the first thing you will see that to create an interface, you have to write this word interface, and all the properties or the method names or the functions are just pure signature. They don't have any logic. In other words, you can see this calculate discount function out here. You can't write any logic in an interface. Please understand, right? So in case if the interviewer is asking you that, can we write some logic inside the interface? No, you can't. In interface, you can only have signatures, pure signature, right? The second thing you will notice out here is that I have not defined here anything called as private or public. By default, all the methods of the interfaces are public. All methods, all properties, all functions are public. So two things, remember, in an interview, he can ask you that, can interface have logic? No, interfaces cannot have logic. Second, can interface have other than public like private or protected, right? No. All the methods, all the properties in an interfaces are always public. You can't even write here public, by default, it is public. Means if you try to write here public is okay, but if you try to write here something like private, he will give you an exception saying that no, customer must declare a body, and must declare a body. It's not marked as abstract and so on. In other words, he's complaining that you are putting up an access modifier here, right? So two things, remember, interfaces only have pure signature. And second, all the properties and all the methods and functions of an interface are always public by default. Now let's again come back to the main theme, which we were discussing. What do you mean by interface is a contract, right? So this is the interface here, iCustomer. Now this iCustomer is implemented in this customer class out here. So you can see here, we are saying iCustomer. So we are actually implementing this interface. What do you mean by when we say implement an interface? When we say that we implement an interface, this means that this customer class is now promising that he will follow iCustomer. So whatever are the property names, the method names, and the function names, right, he will follow as it is religiously, right? And any classes down below, for example, you can see now this gold customer is inheriting from the customer class, right? And if you see silver customer, which is inheriting from the customer class, they will also follow this iCustomer because it is coming in the same inheritance, right? So all these three classes out here promise, that they will follow iCustomer religiously. In other words, if this customer out here, customer class developer out here goes and changes this to calculate discount 1, the interface will actually send an alert here. You can see that there is an alert here saying, or there's a compile time error saying that it does not implement calculate discount. Please go and implement calculate discount, right? So once you implement the interface, you have to follow all the properties and all the methods religiously. So that means that this customer class, wherever it is getting consumed, for example, now you can see here, it is getting consumed in two places, here in line number 9 and in line number 14. So here when I say iCustomer is equal to new gold customer, you can see polymorphism in action. Remember, in polymorphism on runtime, you can point to different instances, right? So you can see iCustomer interface can point to gold customer. It can also point to the other type of customer, which is silver customer. Absolutely, right? So now here, wherever the object is getting consumed, the class is getting consumed, right? I'm saying iCustomer X. So that means now these methods will be followed very religiously. So now the consumer or the developer who is using your class and the developer himself, they are now bound with a contract. They are now bound with this contract iCustomer, and no one can break it. So if this developer breaks this contract for some reason, if he says calculate discount 1, he gets an error, right? He gets an error. And if this client out here, if he goes and puts some other name out here, definitely is going to get an error. So both of them are now bounded with a contract. Both of them have pledged, that they will follow this contract, and this contract should not change. But again comes the same question. So by having a tight contract, between the consumer who is consuming the class and the creator who is creating the class, what is the benefit of it, right? Now think about this, that this developer who is creating this customer class out here does not have an interface. Assume that there is no interface out here. So now what happens is, if he goes and if he changes this to calculate discount 1, he has no idea where it can impact. There is no alert out here. He thinks that he's working in a silos. He thinks that if he changes this, no one is getting affected, right? But now if he has an interface, right? But now if he has an interface out here, and if he goes and changes something out here, now there is an alert here. There is an alert here saying that, hey, if you are going to go and change this, lot of people will be affected. It will affect line number 9, it will affect line number 14, it will affect in some web pages, it will affect in some MVC controller, it will affect in lot of places. So by having a tight contract, right, we do better change management, we do better impact analysis. Remember that when you change at one place, it can affect at lot of places. Specifically in a big software project, once it goes to production, if you change at one place, there should be some kind of an alert mechanism to tell you that, oh, like if you're going to change this, it is going to have breaking changes. It will break in lot of places. So when interface says that it's a contract, it means that both the parties are following the interface, and by doing so, you have better control on the impact analysis, you have better control on the change on the change management. Also, when you change at one places, it will not go and affect in a lot of places, right? So that's why a lot of people say interface is a contract, and if you follow the contract, if you don't change the contract, you have a better software running in production. Once you have stuck your neck by saying that interface is a contract, it cannot be broken and so on, right? If you break the contract, it will have a high impact analysis. The next question will come is that, what if I want to break it? What if I want to change it, right? So let's say your application is running in production and you have a calculate discount out here. What if I want to go and add a new method here saying that this customer will have calculate interest, right? So in case if the customer does not pay money, I want to go and add a new method here called as calculate interest. So how does this work, right? Now the interviewer who will ask this question, what happens if the interface can be changed, are also those interviewers who love to hear that interface can do multiple inheritance. Remember I said interfaces have lot of benefits. One is that some interviewers think that interface is a contract, which is good. Some of the interviewers think that interface is meant for multiple inheritance. So the interviewers who look at the answer of multiple inheritance is looking at this answer, that how will you handle changes in an interface? So first thing, when someone says that yes, go and add a new method like this, calculate interest, you will definitely not do in the current interface. You will actually create a new interface. So what you will do is you will say public interface I customer interest, I customer with interest. Now this I customer with interest will have all the things of I customer. Watch this. It will have all the things of I customer, and he will have this extra method out here. So what it means, wherever we are referencing I customer, we are referencing I customer here, we are referencing I customer here, all the old places wherever we are referencing I customer will not be affected. But the new customers who are there, or the new places where you want to go and use this interface, they can use it happily, right? So in this line number 9, in this line number 14, we are still not touching them. So whatever is working at this moment will work as it is, because you did not change the current interface. You actually created a new interface, I customer with interest, right? And now what you can do is you can go and say, okay, so this customer class will implement I customer, as well as it will implement I customer with interest. So once you say I customer with interest, you can see here now he is complaining here saying that you have said that you will implement I customer with interest. So we need to now go here and implement this method, right? So once you implement this method, you can see that the error goes away. So This is termed as multiple inheritance. So you do multiple inheritance when you want to change the interface. Please understand. So when you say that, one of the scenarios when you do multiple inheritance is that when you want to go and say that, okay, now I want to go and add new interface or new methods, then you go and you create this interface, right? So the old code works as it is, I customer, and whoever wants this new method with interest will use this one. He will say is equal to new silver customer. So he gets calculate discount from the old interface, and he also gets calculate interest. He also gets calculate interest, right? So one of the things, which, wherein we use multiple inheritance is for versioning. So this is I customer for the old places, where the customer class is getting consumed, and I customer with interest, for the new places, where they are interested in calculate interest. Also, interviewers who are very specifically interested to hear about multiple inheritance or multiple interfaces, they would love to see that you understand solid principles. So SOLID, solid principles, in that I stands for interface segregation principle, ISP. So a lot of interviewers, would love to see that, yes, the splitting of the interface, which you have done out here is nothing but it is following interface segregation principle. Interface segregation principle means that you do not force the client to use unnecessarily methods which it is not supposed to use. For example, this I customer does not have this method called as calculate interest, while the I customer with interest has the calculate interest. So the clients, wherever they are using I customer, they are not forced to use calculate interest, right? And the clients, who are seeing this I customer with interest, they want to see both the methods. So interface segregation principle also says that you create different interfaces and you don't force your client to use unnecessary methods which he is not interested to use. So now, with all the discussions we have done till now, let us go ahead and put a nice, holistic and a complete answer before the interviewer for interfaces. So interface is a contract, and by having a contract between the creator and the consumer, we have better change management, we have better impact analysis control, and we have better control on the breaking changes. That is the first thing. Second thing, if you want to go and change an interface, we go and create a new interface, because interface also supports multiple inheritance. So when you're answering this question, please make sure that you have the word multiple inheritance and contract properly communicated to the interviewer. So again, some small yes and no questions. Can we create an instance of an interface? No, you can't. You can't create an instance of an interface. Neither you can create an instance of an abstract class. I repeat this. You can't create an instance of an interface, or you can't create an instance of an abstract class as well, right? Can we do multiple inheritance with abstract classes? No, you can't. You can see here we have two abstract classes here, class 1 and class 2. You can't go and say inherit from class 1 and class 2. You can't do multiple inheritance with an abstract class or a simple class. You can only do multiple inheritance with a interface. One of the places, where the interviewer can really take you for a ride is by asking you, what is the difference between an interface and an abstract class? Now you must be thinking that why is this question even asked? Because interface is a contract, it does not have implementation. Well, when you talk about abstract class, it's a partial class. Some methods are implemented and some methods are not implemented. So why even this question is arising? There is one place, where abstract class and interface look very similar technically. So for example, you can see here, this is an IDAL method, which is add and update. And you can see this is an abstract class ADAL. So if I want, I can go and I can make all my methods as abstract in abstract class. Now, if I do this, then there is no technical difference. Technically, there is no difference between an abstract class and interface. So that's why, this question comes up, and it is one of the most confusing questions, right? So I would suggest everyone that if you are asked this question in the interview, that when all the methods are abstract and between an interface, what is the difference? So if you know the answer, you can go ahead and put down in the comments below. So that brings us to the end of this session out here, this 1 hour session approximately. And I'm very sure that even if you prepare these 25 plus questions, you should be able to handle most of the questions around object-oriented programming. Now, said and done, when you say that you want to go and crack a C# interview in a more confident way, in a more professional way, you want to ask for higher salaries, then I would really suggest you to go and prepare holistically. Prepare end to end. Only object-oriented programming interview questions won't do, right? You have to prepare a lot of other things. So here is a full end-to-end C# interview question with answers tutorial, which I have created. And in this, I have covered a lot of important topics. For example, when you talk about C# interviews, you are asked around garbage collector, you are asked around stack, you are asked around heap, boxing, unboxing, collections, multi-threading, delegates, events, right? It keeps going. One of the questions, which we discussed over here, abstract class versus interfaces, that last question, I have dedicated like 30 minutes only answering, that how can we answer the question around abstract class versus interfaces, right? And if you keep going down below, shadowing, sealed classes, access modifiers, solid principles, aggregation, composition, association, partial classes, and so many questions out there, right? So when you say you want to really crack a C# interview, right, then this is the course for you. You can get this course from this channel. You can go and you can subscribe, to our paid membership. If you want, you can go to Udemy and subscribe. There also we have uploaded our tutorials, or else you can go to questpon.com. If you buy from questpon.com, the good thing is that you get support. You can talk to me. Also, I take some live classes, from 9 to 10 p.m. India time, right? So all that other benefits also come in, right? So go ahead, subscribe to this course. And as said, when I started this video, a prepared developer has more chance of getting a job or has more chance of cracking an interview than an unprepared superhero. You can be a superhero in a company. You must have launched big projects, but preparation is essential. So with that, we go ahead and we end the session. And very quickly, remember I said, if you go and if you share this video in your Facebook, in your LinkedIn, or in your Twitter account, right, you can just go and send a mail saying I've shared it. You get this 200-page C# interview question ebook for free, which has lot of questions out here. And I'm sure that it will help you, right? So go ahead, guys. Prepare for interview properly. Happy learning. Happy job hunting. Thank you.